The Cebu mission and Cebu East as well, it's a blessing because you're very close to the Cebu temple. So with the Cebu mission, the mission home is actually right next to the Cebu temple, which is an awesome blessing. With that, most of the area around the temple is a fairly strong part of the church. There's a few stakes there in the city. It's a pretty big city, with really good attendance, really big wards. I mean, anywhere you go, you'll have less active members, you'll have problems, but it's really, really strong area of the church, which is why there's a temple there to serve all the saints. The farther you go out of the city, the smaller the branches tend to get, or the wards. In the city you have wards and stakes. In more of the rural areas you'll have branches and districts. So it kind of just depends on where you are. There's a really big mix of how strong the church is, how many members there are, things like that. In general, the Philippines is a really strong place for the church. And while I was there, actually, there were, I think, 2 districts that became stakes. So it's growing, it's progressing. But once again, it kind of just depends. The more rural your area is, usually the more you're going to be working with branch leadership, just kind of growing the branch. And then in the wards, it's more on, getting the members involved in just missionary work and just that kind of, just the missionary work. So there's a big mix, really strong area of the church in Cebu City, and the farther you get out, the smaller it tends to get. One of the greatest blessings of serving in the Philippines is it's a Christian country. So almost everyone you talk to, they believe in Christ, they believe in God, they love Christ, and that's really awesome. You can really talk to anyone about spiritual things and they're receptive, they understand, they believe in those things. So that's a great blessing. With that, the challenge is many people are content with what they've learned, what they know about Christ. They don't, they're happy to talk about Christ, not so happy to talk about different churches and different theologies and things like that. So it's a challenge of being able to find, you can find people to talk about Christ. It's hard to talk about the church and talk about the new things you want to share with them. People tend to be a little less receptive to that. But in general, I see it as a huge blessing. And one of my favorite parts of the Philippines is they're a believing people. They believe in prayer. They believe in miracles. They believe in the atonement. So it's a great blessing. I loved that about the culture and the place is it's a believing people. And that's one of my favorite things. I love that, I guess. Cebu, in general, the mission, it's split up on a couple of different islands. So there's some bigger cities where most of the missionaries are, and then a lot of rural areas as well. So if you're serving there, you'll probably end up being on a different island or two. You'll see kind of a good mix of city and rural, and it's kind of the basic geography. You get a good mix of everything in Cebu, which is another thing I really liked about it. There's great things about the city and great things about the bukid, is what we call it, kind of the more mountainous rural areas. My first 2 areas were actually in Cebu East Mission. My first area was in Liloan, which is the kind of towards the north part of Cebu. After that, I went to a different island. I was in Hagna in Bohol. After that, I went to Apas, which is in the middle of Cebu City, the crazy part of the city, the concrete jungle type stuff. After that, I transferred to Amlan, which is on Negros. So that's the other island. There's a few main islands. That's kind of the other main island. After that, I went back to Cebu in a smaller place called Pinamungahan. I served in the office in a while in the middle of the city, just right by the temple. And then I ended in a tiny little town. There's a place called Lamak, which is just up in the mountains of Cebu. Really isolated place. Really cool place to serve, but also has its challenges. So